Welcome back to The Explainer. So, if you're really focused on understanding how things actually work in the real world, you are in the exact right place today. We're tearing down all those crazy myths and looking at the unvarnished, grounded truth about how everyday people build substantial wealth. We've dug into some real-world data, some amazing first-hand accounts from a deep dive where people who have actually made it just laid bare exactly how they did it. And trust me on this, the reality is way more interesting and a whole lot more accessible than you probably think.
So let's dive right in with a super simple question. When I say the word wealthy, what pops into your head? Just take a second to picture it, right? Do you see private jets, massive yachts, maybe designer clothes and a lifestyle that looks straight out of a hip-hop music video? Because that's what Hollywood and social media constantly condition us to see. But as you'll see from our source material, the truth paints a completely different, incredibly grounded picture.
It turns out there's a massive gap between expectation and reality. According to the actual millionaires in our data, real wealth looks, well, shockingly ordinary. We're not talking about private jets here. We're talking about folks who explicitly credit their wealth to things like driving a 22-year-old Mini Cooper, or, learning how to cook incredibly cheap meals at home, literally just beans and rice, and avoiding those flashy purchases entirely. It really turns out that stealth wealth is the real wealth.
To make sense of all these stories, we can group them into 4 distinct paths to wealth: the boring path, high earners, the entrepreneurs, and finally, luck and the wildcards.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the boring path. Now, this path is without a doubt the most mathematically accessible one for the average person. And the math here is just fascinating. One of our primary sources laid out a combined household income of $180,000 a year. Now, obviously, that's a fantastic upper middle class income, right? Especially if you happen to live in the South or the Midwest where the cost of living is a bit lower. But here's the secret sauce. It isn't just about the income. It's the fact that they only live off of $100,000. So they instantly created an $80,000 gap simply by living way below their means.
So what exactly do they do with that massive surplus? Well, they invest it. Our sources repeatedly hammered home this strategy of just steady discipline over 20-plus years, pouring all that extra cash into broad market index funds, things like VOO or VTI, which, if you don't know, essentially lets you own a tiny little piece of the entire stock market. When you combine a couple decades of a bull market with a really high savings rate, even a self-described mouth breather working a boring middle management corporate job can become incredibly rich. It's automated, it's slow, and honestly, it is devastatingly effective.
To really humanize this, I want you to hear this quote. This actually comes from a commercial airline pilot who's pulling in nearly $500,000 a year. You'd completely expect him to be driving a Ferrari, right? Nope. He is the original owner of a 22-year-old Mini Cooper. He and his wife live in a super modest 1,700 square foot home in Denver, and they are nearing $1 million net worth in their early 40s simply because they just aren't showy with their cash. His ultimate advice? Max out your 401k, buy a house, and live below your means. This boring path works so well because it's rooted in reality, not ego.
Moving on to Section 2, high earners.
Now, what if your path isn't middle management? Let's break down the exact formula one of our sources used to retire at age 40 with a staggering $6 million. They call this the educational treadmill. Step 1, get extremely high test scores as a kid. Step 2, get into the absolute most competitive elite university possible. Step 3, move to a super expensive city like New York or San Francisco for top-tier jobs in finance or consulting. And Step 4, marry a like-minded spouse and invest at least half of your astronomical income.
So, the really crucial point here, and by the way, this was fiercely debated in our source material, is why those elite universities actually matter so much. One source shared this story about a high school friend who went to an Ivy League school for what he called a quote-unquote bullshit degree. But looking back, he realized his friend was actually brilliant. The actual coursework wasn't the point at all. Going to elite universities is often just about paying for access to a highly exclusive, powerful network. It's a way of demonstrating you can play the game.
And even outside of high finance, these high-income professionals follow a remarkably similar savings trajectory. Check out this breakdown from a board-certified anesthesiologist making $500,000 a year at a state university. He funnels $80,000 a year straight into a retirement account, plus another $50,000 to $100,000 into a standard brokerage account. This just proves a really vital point. Having a massive income doesn't automatically equal wealth unless it is paired with a massive, aggressive savings rate.
All right, Section 3, the entrepreneurs.
These are the folks who just stepped off the corporate ladder entirely.
And we aren't just talking about glossy Silicon Valley tech startups here. We're talking about highly profitable, totally unglamorous ventures. We have a pest control business doing $8 million a year. We have professional services firms built on this relentless, constant learning. And of course, real estate. We saw entrepreneurs using the profits from everyday businesses like restaurants and salons to just buy up apartment buildings and strip malls, which creates these multiple, unstoppable streams of monthly income.
I actually want to pause on that pest control business for a second because it is an absolute masterclass in wealth creation. The owner noted his business had 90% recurring revenue. That means predictable, continuous income rolling in from the exact same customers month after month, year after year. So when it finally came time to retire after 30 years, that recurring revenue made his business insanely valuable to potential buyers, allowing for a massive, wealth-securing exit.
Finally, Section 4, Luck and the Wildcards.
Look, we have to be completely honest here. Sometimes extreme wealth is tied to completely unpredictable circumstances. When you look at the raw data, some people are incredibly candid about their wildcards. A few bluntly stated their entire wealth strategy was simply being born to rich parents. Another person got hired by a startup, was awarded stock at $30 a share, and then a forced buyout suddenly liquidated it at $93 a share. We also saw super lucky derivatives trades with 17x and 32x returns. And perhaps the wildest wildcard of all, someone in the data actually claimed to be the guy who sold 2 pizzas for 10,000 bitcoins back in 2010. Insane, right?
But here is absolutely the most important takeaway when it comes to wildcards, courtesy of that former derivatives trader. He openly admitted the amount of luck involved was huge, the only skill was realizing it was luck and not going broke trying to repeat it. I mean, wow, hit the nail on the head. If you happen to get lucky on a crypto surge or a wild stock bet, take the win and walk away. Betting on lightning to strike twice is just a fast recipe for going broke, not a reliable long-term financial strategy. So as we pivot to the conclusion of our explainer today, we really need to weave all these disparate stories back together. Because whether you take the boring path, grind it out as a high earner, or build a business, there are absolutely common threads here. Universal habits that almost every self-made wealthy person in our data shares.
Here is the absolute bedrock of wealth building. Number 1, live below your means. I literally cannot stress this enough. Number 2, max out your retirement accounts, whether that's a 401k with an employer match or a Roth IRA where the money grows tax-free. Number 3, invest in broad index funds early, often, and just leave them alone. And number 4, and honestly, this came up a surprising amount, marry a like-minded spouse who is totally aligned with your financial goals. A partner who wants to spend everything you make will completely derail your entire trajectory.
When you break down the true wealth formula, it really is all about the ratios. Notice how the living expenses slice is just a tiny fraction of the whole pie? It honestly doesn't matter if the entire pie represents $165,000 or $500,000. Your net worth relies entirely on keeping that expense slice small so you can maximize the savings and investment slice. That surplus is the engine for your future freedom.
Which brings us directly to the central thesis of this entire explainer. Drawn straight from the lives of these extremely successful individuals, the core philosophy is simply this: wealth isn't just about the money you make, it's about the money you keep. A high salary is fantastic, but if it all goes to leased luxury cars and oversized mortgages, you aren't wealthy. You're just acting as a high-paid conduit for banks and dealerships.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. Look at your own life right now. Really look at your bank statements. Are your current habits building the wealth you actually want to keep, or are you just funding the illusion of wealth today at the huge expense of your freedom tomorrow? Take a hard look at those habits, make the adjustments, and start building your own boring, beautiful path to prosperity. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.